It's quiet in Santa Fe. Too quiet for what's about to unfold. Inside a small suburban garage, officers stand frozen, not because of what they see, but because of the weight in the air. Something irreversible has happened here. In one corner, they notice an old sword propped against a dresser, an odd sight in any modern home. And near it, the signs of a tragedy that would soon unravel into one of the most unsettling love stories in recent memory. At the center of it all, a 19-year-old named Kiara McCauley, whose calm demeanor in the aftermath would leave detectives speechless. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of true crimes, mysteries, and cold cases are told. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. To understand this story, we need to step back to a house where a mother and daughter lived ordinary lives until the knock on the door changed everything. That morning, Kiara's mom, Tara, answered the door expecting a routine visit. Instead, she was met by officers asking to see the garage. She blinked, confused. Why the garage? And then came the sentence that would replay in her mind forever. "Ma'am, we need to check inside. There's been an incident." Moments later, the truth surfaced. Something terrible had occurred right under her roof. It's strange how normal mornings can turn into crime scenes before breakfast. One minute you're making coffee, the next you're talking to detectives about things you thought only happened in Netflix dramas. The person found in the garage was Grace Jennings, a 21-year-old college student, creative, ambitious, and loved by many. Grace and Kiara had once been close, but their relationship had unraveled into jealousy and tension after Grace began dating Kiara's former boyfriend, Isaac. Sound complicated? It was. Like a Shakespeare tragedy rewritten through text messages and bad decisions. Police quickly connected the dots, a tangled triangle of love, betrayal, and emotional breakdowns. When they brought Kiara in for questioning, her demeanor was calm, almost unnervingly so. Detective Javier Vigil later said he had never seen anyone so composed. When asked what happened, Kiara simply said she acted out of emotion. No outburst, no tears. Just that, quiet acceptance. Love triangles are messy enough when all that's at stake is social media status. Add jealousy, impulsivity, and a weapon from a medieval flea market? You've got yourself a case that even crime podcasts have to fact-check twice. Tara, Kiara's mother, struggled to comprehend what she was hearing. Her daughter, the girl she raised, was now at the center of an investigation that would soon make national headlines. And when reporters asked neighbors what Kiara was like, most said the same thing. She seemed quiet, polite, maybe a little intense. Funny how the quiet ones always become the loudest headlines. As investigators dug deeper, they learned that the situation wasn't as clear-cut as it seemed. Kiara's story began to shift. She spoke of different sides of herself, of blurred memories, of voices and emotions that didn't always belong to her. Detectives weren't sure whether they were dealing with a confession or a psychological labyrinth. One of them later said, "It felt less like interviewing a suspect and more like talking to two people in one body." By the end of that first interrogation, one thing was certain. This wasn't just a story about jealousy. It was about identity, obsession, and the thin line between heartbreak and horror. And when Kiara finally looked up and said, "You don't understand who I really am," Detective Vigil knew. This case was just beginning. The room was cold, not the kind of cold that needs a jacket, but the kind that makes your stomach sink. Across from Detective Javier Vigil sat Kiara McCauley, her hands folded neatly, her face unreadable. If you didn't know why she was there, you might mistake her for a student at a scholarship interview. But this wasn't a scholarship. This was a confession, or something close to it. Detective Vigil clicked his pen, trying to break the silence. "So, Kiara, tell me what happened." She didn't flinch, didn't cry. She just tilted her head, like she was deciding which version of the truth to tell. Then, in a soft voice, she said something that would make even seasoned investigators pause. "It wasn't me. It was her." Vigil frowned. "Her who?" Kiara blinked. "The other me." It wasn't a deflection. It wasn't sarcasm. It was conviction. The eerie kind that made officers double-check their training manuals on abnormal psychology. There's a special kind of chill when a suspect starts using pronouns like a horror movie trailer. Detective Vigil leaned back and whispered to a colleague, "I think we're interviewing the sequel." Over the next hour, Kiara explained that she had personalities, versions of herself that took over when she was angry or sad. She called one of them Ray, and according to her, Ray was the one who had acted. Now Vigil had heard his fair share of excuses. "It wasn't me. I blacked out. I was possessed by heartbreak." But this was different. Kiara wasn't defensive. She was detached, eerily rational while describing something deeply irrational. Meanwhile, across town, Isaac, Kiara's boyfriend, was being questioned too. If Kiara was calm, Isaac was the opposite, shaking, pale, talking a mile a minute. He told detectives that he'd been video chatting with Kiara that morning, that he saw something horrible happen in the background. And then the screen went black. Detectives listened, but something didn't add up. If Isaac saw what he claimed, why didn't he call the police sooner? Why did he wait nearly half an hour before saying anything? When asked, Isaac muttered, "I didn't think it was real." Maybe it was shock, maybe it was guilt, or maybe, just maybe, he knew more than he was saying. You'd think modern technology would solve crimes faster. Live streams, messages, location data, but here it only made things blurrier. It was like trying to catch a shadow on camera. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of the story, and within hours, the headlines had written their own version. Teenage love triangle turns deadly. Sword and the city. Murder or mental breakdown? Social media did what social media does best, turn tragedy into entertainment and speculation into certainty. But behind those headlines was a young woman who might not have even known who she truly was. As the interviews continued, Kiara's personality seemed to shift in real time. Sometimes she'd speak softly, apologetically. Other times her voice would harden, distant, unfamiliar, like someone else had stepped into the conversation. Detective Vigil began to wonder, was this a performance or a cry for help? He'd seen guilt before, the nervous kind, the angry kind, the kind that seeps through body language. But this was something else. This was a person divided by her own mind. When Vigil left the room that night, he turned to another detective and said quietly, "If she's faking, she deserves an Oscar. If she's not, we're in deep." And the next morning, when the psychological evaluation began, Kiara would reveal something that made even the experts question reality. Because sometimes, the most dangerous place isn't the scene of the crime. It's the inside of your own mind. When the human mind breaks, it doesn't shatter like glass. It fractures like a mirror. Each piece still reflects something real, but none of it tells the full story. That's exactly how investigators felt as they tried to piece together Kiara McCauley's mind. Was she a manipulative mastermind? Or a lost teenager whose reality had splintered beyond repair? Either way, they were running out of time to tell the difference. After hours of interrogation, detectives called in Dr. Evelyn Corcoran, a clinical psychologist who'd worked on complex cases before. Her first impression of Kiara was unexpected. She seemed bright, calm, and cooperative, Dr. Corcoran later said. But her eyes told a different story, like she was watching two movies at once. During the evaluation, Kiara spoke openly about Ray, her so-called other personality. She claimed Ray appeared when she felt betrayed or powerless, a shadow version of herself that took control when emotions got too strong. Dr. Corcoran asked gently, "And when Ray takes over, what happens?" Kiara smiled faintly. "I get to rest." That single sentence sent chills down the psychologist's spine. In another context, "I get to rest" sounds like a spa slogan. In a police interview, it's a red flag wrapped in a therapy blanket. Dr. Corcoran ran through standard assessments, dissociation, stress responses, trauma history. Kiara's answers were fluid, sometimes contradictory, but always eerily self-aware. One moment she'd talk about Grace with sadness, saying she missed her and wished things had been different. The next, she'd shift tone entirely, saying Grace shouldn't have betrayed her trust. It was as if two emotional realities were competing for airtime. While doctors analyzed Kiara's psyche, the outside world was losing its mind too. True crime forums, TikTok detectives, and podcast hosts dissected every rumor they could find. Some saw Kiara as a manipulative villain. Others painted her as a misunderstood victim of mental illness. A few just wanted to sell merch that said, "Justice for Grace." Social media turned the story into a morality play, one where empathy and outrage fought for the spotlight. Meanwhile, Grace's family stayed quiet. They didn't want to see theories, they wanted to see accountability. Back at the facility, Kiara's sessions continued. Some days she'd be withdrawn, doodling spirals in her notebook. Other days, she'd talk for hours about identity, about how sometimes she felt like a passenger in her own head. Dr. Corcoran noted that Kiara showed signs of dissociative behavior, but not enough to diagnose a full disorder. Her conclusion: Kiara might be using psychological terminology to justify actions she couldn't emotionally face. In other words, maybe she wasn't delusional. Maybe she was just avoiding guilt. It's funny, not haha funny, but cosmic irony funny, how people use psychology as armor. One minute you're quoting Freud to explain your bad decisions. The next you're in a room with professionals trying to prove you actually are Freud. Even Dr. Corcoran admitted it was hard to know where Kiara ended and the other personalities began, if they even existed at all. Then came the digital forensics. Investigators recovered text messages between Isaac and Kiara from the weeks leading up to the tragedy. They weren't just romantic, they were obsessive. Conversations that blurred the line between love and manipulation. In several, Isaac encouraged Kiara to stand up for herself and do something about Grace's betrayal. The tone was cryptic, emotional, not commands, but enough to raise eyebrows. Detectives began to wonder, had Kiara been influenced by Isaac's words? Or had she twisted them into justification for her own anger? When confronted with the messages, Kiara didn't deny them. She just stared at the screen and whispered, "Ray told me to delete those." And in that instant, even the most skeptical investigator felt it. The strange sense that, whatever the truth was, it lived somewhere between guilt and ghosts. Because sometimes the scariest question isn't who did it, it's who was in control when it happened. Every courtroom has its own soundtrack. The shuffle of papers, the echo of heels, the low hum of whispers. But on Kiara McCauley's sentencing day, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. 19 years old, convicted of second-degree homicide. A life paused at the starting line. The judge's words were calm, measured, but every syllable felt like a verdict on more than just one person. "Miss McCauley," the judge said, "the evidence shows intention clouded by instability. We recognize your youth and your mental health challenges, but the consequences remain." Translation: mercy but not freedom. The sentence, decades in a state facility with psychiatric supervision, landed like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence no one wanted to write. Kiara didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded, as though she'd been expecting it the whole time. Her mother, Tara, tried to reach out as deputies led Kiara away, whispering something the microphones didn't catch, though some lip readers online swore she said, "Come back to me." You know it's a grim day when the highlight reel of your life plays out between a prosecutor's slideshow and a psychiatrist's testimony. True crime fans were dissecting the trial like it was the season finale of a prestige drama, except this was real, and there were no post-credits bloopers. Still, a morbid truth lingered. The internet loves closure, but real stories rarely have it. Grace Jennings's family spoke softly after the verdict. They didn't express vengeance, only exhaustion. One relative told reporters, "We just hope people remember Grace for who she was, not how she was lost." In a world addicted to the sensational, that was perhaps the most human request of all. Online, debates raged. Was Kiara a villain or a victim of her own fractured identity? Psychologists weighed in. Podcasters analyzed every frame of footage. But the truth was simpler and sadder. 3 young lives had been rewritten by a single, irreversible moment. If heartbreak were a college course, half of us would graduate with honors. But Kiara's story was proof that when emotion becomes obsession, the syllabus ends in tragedy. One online commenter said it best. Unintentionally, she lost herself trying to keep someone who'd already moved on. And really, isn't that the modern definition of horror? In the years that followed, Kiara's name faded from headlines. She enrolled in therapy, took courses through a prison education program, and began writing journals filled with reflections, remorse, and philosophy. In one entry, later published in a psychology journal, she wrote, "I spent years trying to understand who Ray was. I think she was just the part of me that couldn't bear being ordinary. No demons, no possession, just pain wearing a different face." And maybe that's the real moral of this story. That the monsters we fear most aren't strangers in the dark, but the thoughts we refuse to face in ourselves. So the next time jealousy whispers, when obsession scratches at the door, remember Kiara's story. Because what begins as heartbreak can end as history. If you want to keep exploring the human mind's darker corners, subscribe, stay curious, and never stop questioning what you think you know. Because in the world of true crime, the scariest stories are the ones that could happen to anyone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us what you learned in the comments below.